Welcome aboard Beyond the Engine Room, a podcast produced by Rob Peterson, an ex-Marine fitter who tells us about his travels around the globe, some of the characters he met, the ports he saw, and even a glimpse inside the engine room. Okay, so welcome back, everybody. This time we're traveling back in time, back to the 80s, maybe early 90s, and the days before the internet.
Yeah, think pre-internet, pre-mobile phones even, when a work trip could really feel like stepping into the unknown.
Exactly. That's the world we're diving into today, following the journey of Rob, a Marine fitter, starting in Cardiff.
We've got some great source material for this one. Interviews, some old photos. It's really fascinating to see how work and travel were so different back then.
So our mission, if you will, is to piece together Rob's experience, see the world through his eyes, starting with this almost unbelievable journey from, well, like you said, from Cardiff.
To Miami.
Yeah, to Miami.
It all starts at Cardiff Central Station. Rob's there with his mates, expecting a pretty standard job, something local.
Right, probably thinking, all right, where's the van? What pub are we stopping at on the way?
Exactly. But then, surprise, they're told they're flying out to Miami.
I can't even imagine, what a shock.
Oh, absolutely. Talk about a change of plans. And back then, no quick Google search to get your bearings.
So they're off to Heathrow. What happens next?
A classic airport bar stop, pre-flight pints.
Is that like a big thing back in the day?
Oh, yeah. Airport bars were the place to be. You'd meet all sorts of interesting people, swap stories, calm the nerves before a flight.
Makes sense. All right, so they make it to Miami, touchdown at Port Everglades.
And there she is, the Sky Princess.
The cruise ship.
The one and only. This thing was massive, like 3 football fields long.
Wow. That's hard to even picture.
It was a floating city, shops, restaurants, pools, the whole 9 yards. The peak of luxury cruising back then.
I bet Rob was pretty impressed.
Oh, he was blown away, especially as a marine fitter, seeing the scale of the engineering involved.
Did he talk much about his first impressions of Miami?
He did mention the heat. Coming from Cardiff, that Florida sun must have been quite a shock.
I bet. So they're on this massive ship, but they're not there for a holiday, right?
No, sir. They're there to work. Rob and his team are tasked with some engine maintenance.
Engine room on a cruise ship. I can't imagine that's the most glamorous job.
It's hot, it's cramped, it's loud, but it's vital. These ships don't run without guys like Rob keeping those engines going.
True. So what happens next? Where does the Sky Princess take them?
Well, after Miami, they set sail north, up the coast to Norfolk, Virginia.
Virginia. Why Virginia?
The ship was scheduled for a dry dock.
A dry dock. Sorry. Refresh my memory on what that is exactly.
Sure. It's basically a giant basin that they can flood and then drain, so they can get a ship out of the water for repairs and maintenance below the waterline.
Ah, right. Makes sense. So they sail up the U.S. coast. Did Rob mention anything about that part of the journey?
Oh, yeah. He talked about passing this massive naval base, Newport News Shipbuilding.
Newport News. I've heard of that. Wasn't that a major shipbuilding center?
Oh, absolutely. Historically huge. They built some of the most iconic warships for the U.S. Navy there. Aircraft carriers, battleships, the works.
So they're sailing past this place. What's going through Rob's mind?
Well, he was awestruck. To see all those warships up close, it really hit home the sheer scale of American naval power.
And it's such a contrast, right?
Yeah.
He starts in Cardiff, ends up seeing this display of military might.
Yeah, it makes you think about the different worlds connected by sea travel.
Yeah, so Rob is on the Sky Princess.
Okay.
And he's going up the eastern seaboard
Oh, nice.
of the United States. And they arrive at the dry dock. So picture this massive cruise ship arriving at the dry dock.
Wow, it must have been an incredible sight.
I know. And Rob talks about all the anticipation, the meticulous planning that went into every step.
Yeah, it's not just about steering the ship, right?
No, you've got to factor in tides, currents, and then there's a whole team of people who need to be perfectly synchronized. Okay, so let's say they've managed to get this behemoth safely inside the dry dock.
Right.
What happens next?
Rob describes it as a beehive of activity.
It's like the ship goes in for open heart surgery.
Wow, that's a vivid image.
Yeah, the dry dock transforms into this bustling hub of activity.
So who are all these people working on the ship?
You've got marine fitters, welders, electricians, painters, all sorts of specialists.
Wow, a real all-star team.
And they're working around the clock.
What kind of repairs and upgrades are they doing?
Oh, everything from inspecting and repairing the hull to replacing massive propellers.
Those things are huge. Shipyards, they're these fascinating little worlds,
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of a mix of raw industrial power and like this incredible need for precision.
That's a wild combination for sure.
Yeah.
So picture this. Rob's down in the engine room.
Okay.
Grease, sweat, the roar of machinery, the whole 9 yards. Right?
Yeah.
He's working alongside these, well, African-American women.
Oh, really? No, that's
Yeah.
not something you typically picture in a shipyard back then.
Exactly. It's not the image that comes to mind. And get this, they're rocking these long manicured nails.
Wait, long nails in an engine room? That's a detail that really makes you think. You wouldn't exactly expect that kind of style in such a demanding job.
Right. Talk about breaking stereotypes.
Yeah.
But it really speaks to, like, their strength and individuality, even in a place like that.
Absolutely. Back then, shipyards were predominantly male-dominated environments, so their presence alone was a challenge to the status quo.
Definitely. Makes you wonder, though, about those conversations. Trying to, shout technical jargon over the roar of the engines. You mentioned there were some initial hiccups, just understanding each other's accents at first.
Oh, I bet. That's such a classic human moment, isn't it? Like right in the middle of all that heavy machinery.
Right.
It just highlights that even in those industrial settings, communication is key.
For sure. Especially when a misunderstanding could have some pretty serious consequences.
Absolutely. Do you think they relied a lot on hand signals and stuff?
Oh, I'd imagine. But, it wasn't all serious business down there. Rob told this hilarious story about waking up one morning and his whole cabin was bathed in this eerie green light.
Green light. Oh, wait, is this the Swarfega incident?
The one and only. So it turns out the painters, they were using Swarfega to protect the port light glass while they were painting the hull.
Swarfega, huh? That heavy-duty hand cleaner?
The very same.
Well, I mean, it makes a strange kind of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Swarfega is incredibly effective at removing, like, grease and grime, so I can see the logic, even if it's a bit unorthodox.
Right. Talk about thinking outside the toolbox. But it really shows the resourcefulness of these shipyard workers, finding creative solutions, even if they're not exactly by the book.
Definitely. And it injects a little bit of humor into what was probably a very demanding job.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Especially when you consider the schedule Rob described. Long hours, very limited time off.
Yeah, intense.
Tense stuff.
Yeah, it makes sense. Ship repair and construction, they often have these incredibly tight deadlines, so the pace is relentless.
I can imagine every minute counts when you're trying to get a vessel back on schedule. So once all this intense work is done, how do they get the ship back into the water?
That's another delicate process.
I bet.
It's like reversing the initial docking procedure.
Okay.
But now you have to consider the ship's altered weight distribution due to the repairs and upgrades.
Right, that makes sense.
They have to very carefully flood the dry dock, ensuring the ship rises evenly and maintains stability.
So it's a slow and controlled process.
Exactly. And then the tugboats come back into play.
Ah, the trusty tugboats.
Yeah, they gently maneuver the ship out of the dock and back into open water.
I can only imagine the sense of relief when they see that giant vessel safely back in its element.
Oh, absolutely. Rob talks about it as a real sense of accomplishment, not just for the crew, but for all the workers involved.
They've earned it.
They've basically given the ship a new lease on life. Exact.
Which makes this next story even wilder. Rob's on a ship that's sailing along, everything's fine, then suddenly, boom, everything goes quiet. The engines just stop, dead in the water.
Oh, wow. That's got to be unnerving. Talk about a sudden change of pace.
Right. So
Yeah.
what happened?
Well, it turned out some of the joints in the steam lines, they'd been installed incorrectly back at the shipyard.
And just how big of a problem is that?
Yeah.
I mean, I get that steam is hot, but
Think of the steam lines like a network of superhighways carrying superheated high-pressure steam throughout the entire ship.
okay.
Any leak, any rupture, and you've got scalding steam spewing everywhere. You're talking serious burns, even triggering a chain reaction of failures.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and we're talking thousands of pounds of pressure per square inch coursing through those lines. It's not something you want to mess with.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
So how'd they fix it? Did they even manage to get this ship moving again?
It took an incredible effort. Rob and the other engineers, they worked nonstop, 24 hours straight, in really tough conditions.
Wow.
I mean, picture trying to repair a system carrying superheated steam, using buckets of cold water just to cool your tools.
That's dedication.
Absolutely. Real resourcefulness under pressure.
So did they at least get some kind of recognition for all that, averting a potential disaster?
Well, they got a couple of cases of beer.
Wait, seriously? That's it?
It really puts things in perspective, doesn't it? How work culture has changed. Their efforts would probably be recognized very differently today.
No doubt. And get this, as soon as they limped back to port, Rob was sent right back out to another ship, the Royal Princess. No rest for the weary.
Sounds about right for shipyard life. But those are stories for another deep dive. Thanks for joining us on Beyond the Engine Room. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with others who might find it fascinating. See you next time on the open seas.